Hello, and welcome to another quiet journey into the slow-moving tide of the past. You found yourself here with sleepless mysteries, and tonight we'll be drifting back to a time when the world found itself caught in a storm of mud, steel, and endless waiting. As you settle in, perhaps beneath the familiar weight of your blankets or beside the soft hum of night, allow your thoughts to quiet. There's no urgency here, no drama, just a slow, wandering look at a piece of history that was anything but peaceful, yet told in a way that invites your mind to soften and your eyes to grow heavier with every minute. This episode is called Why It Sucked to Be a World War I Trench Soldier. But don't let the title fool you. While the suffering of those years was immense, our goal here is not to dwell in horror, but to gently uncover the quiet, daily hardships of life in the trenches, the routines, the discomforts, the oddities, the things that made these soldiers' lives a long stretch of endurance. We'll begin by slipping into the daily rhythms of trench life. Then we'll follow the path of one soldier, whose journey took him from countryside peace to frontline exhaustion. After that, we'll pause to reflect on the mysteries of forgotten artifacts, odd trench customs, and cultural traces buried in time. And finally, we'll look at the world outside the trenches, at the lives of the officers, the politicians, the nurses, and the lucky ones who never saw the mud firsthand. But first, take a breath, let your body rest, and imagine yourself there more than a century ago, in a world shaped by silence and shellfire, bravery and boredom, and the steady, soft rhythm of waiting. Imagine yourself waking up, not to an alarm, but to a distant rumble. Perhaps thunder, perhaps something else. It's hard to tell anymore. The sky above you is a grayish smear, filtered through canvas and wet burlap. The smell is immediate: damp earth, burned fuel, mildew, and the slightly sour tang of unwashed bodies. You're in a trench, one of many, a long, narrow scar dug into the countryside of France or Belgium. It stretches on in both directions like some stubborn man-made river. The walls around you are reinforced with sandbags and wooden planks, though they buckle under the weight of last night's rain. The ground beneath your boots is soft, sticky, and unpredictable. Sometimes it grips you like glue, other times you sink nearly to your ankles. That's just how it is here. The day begins, not with excitement or even dread, but with routine. The ritual is called Stand To. Every morning before first light, every soldier rises bleary-eyed to prepare for a potential attack. Most of the time it doesn't come, but once in a while it does. And so you wait, rifle ready, watching the horizon, shoulder to shoulder with men just as tired as you. When the sun has finally pulled itself over the edge of the earth and nothing has happened, you're allowed to relax. Some men doze again, others eat, if eating is the right word. Breakfast is often dry biscuits or cold corned beef, known not so lovingly as bully beef. Tea, when available, is a moment of minor joy, warm, slightly bitter, and sometimes gritty from the tin cup it's brewed in. The rest of the day is filled with a peculiar kind of monotony. You might be ordered to repair the trench walls, to carry supplies, or to take part in fatigue duty, which sounds more restful than it is. It usually means hauling heavy crates, digging new drainage channels, or cleaning up after the mess that nature and humanity have made. When not on duty, you might write a letter to a mother, a sweetheart, a brother still too young to be sent out. You might carve your initials into a plank, or trade stories with the man beside you, even if you've both heard them before. There's comfort in repetition. Time is hard to measure here. You lose track of days. One moment bleeds into the next. The only constants are the mud and the sound. There's the ever-present hum of artillery in the distance, low, continuous, like thunder in the bones. Sometimes it gets louder. Sometimes it's punctuated by the sudden bark of a rifle. But mostly it's just there. Always there. so constant it begins to fade into the background of your mind, like the ticking of a clock in an old house. Then there are the trench pests. The rats are bold here, well-fed and unconcerned by your presence. Some grow to the size of small cats. They scurry along the parapets, over your boots, under your sleeping bag. You try not to think about what they eat. And then the lice, invisible at first, then unmistakable, a slow, crawling itch that never fully goes away. You might spend hours picking through your seams, trying to catch them. Some soldiers joke about it, others give up. It's just another thing to endure. There are latrines, of course, but only barely, usually a deep hole with planks laid across. No privacy, no dignity, and when it rains, and it often does, those holes flood, and the stench becomes something you try not to notice. And the mud, it's not just wet dirt, it's a character all its own. It clings to everything, boots, coats, rations, letters from home. Sometimes it seems alive, as though it might swallow you whole if you stop moving too long. Sleep comes when and where it can. You might curl up in a dugout, dark, cramped and damp, or sleep sitting up with your back against the trench wall. You learn to rest in short snatches, an hour here, a few minutes there, always with one ear open, listening for the shrill call of the whistle that might mean another attack. Still, there are odd comforts. A photograph from home, smudged but precious. A pair of dry socks, rare and sacred. The muffled laughter of men trading absurd stories or singing half-remembered songs. The feeling of a letter in your pocket, its words read so many times they've left creases in your mind. And above it all, sometimes the stars. When the shelling pauses, when the clouds part, you can look up and see the same stars that hang over peaceful towns far away. And for a moment it's quiet. Just you, the mud, and the sky. That is a day in the life of a World War I trench soldier. Repetitive, wet, tiring, sometimes frightening, mostly dull, but always endured. And now, let us turn our gaze to just one man, one soldier whose life, while not unlike the others, has left us a trail to follow. A quiet life lived in the cracks between the history books. Imagine now, a boy in the north of England. The year is 1913. The industrial world is already humming. The skies above the town are streaked with coal smoke, and narrow stone streets wind through rows of terraced houses. Among them lives Harold Templeton, a quiet young man of 19. He works as a railway clerk. His hands are soft, his posture straight, and his life is unremarkable in the most comfortable of ways. He is the second son of a coal foreman and a seamstress. Their home smells of boiled tea leaves and pressed cotton. On Sundays, they walk to church beneath wool coats, and Harold often stops to tie his brother's laces. He likes routine. He enjoys reading the local paper, even if most days he only scans the headlines. There's a girl at the corner bakery who smiles at him sometimes, and though he's never dared speak to her, he thinks about her more than he admits. Then the war begins. In the summer of 1914, the streets shift. Posters go up, marching bands arrive. Uniformed men parade through town square, offering coins and promises to those who enlist. Harold doesn't rush to join. He's hesitant, not afraid exactly, but cautious. Still, when his older brother signs up, Harold feels something settle in him, a quiet sense of inevitability. By October, Harold Templeton is enlisted in the King's Own Yorkshire Light Infantry. His world is replaced by new sounds, boots on gravel, shouted orders, the metallic jingle of canteens and rifle bolts. His handwriting grows rougher, his skin begins to tan and toughen. But even so, Harold is not a natural soldier. He is precise, thoughtful, and slow to anger. He is deployed to France in early 1915. The crossing is grey and bitterly cold. The sea is choppy, but Harold writes to his mother that it was peaceful enough if you kept your eyes closed. His first trench is near Armentières. It is not what he expected. In his letters, he describes it as a miserable sort of ditch, not quite wide enough to stretch, not quite deep enough to feel safe. He draws small maps on the backs of envelopes, carefully penned lines that trace the dugouts, the duckboards, the forward saps. His penmanship remains oddly elegant amid the grime. In truth, Harold doesn't see much action at first. Months go by with little more than exchanges of shell fire and the occasional gas scare. But the toll isn't measured only in attacks. It's measured in monotony, in discomfort, in the long, aching fatigue that builds like a slow tide. In one letter he writes, "There is a sort of sameness to it all. The same mud, the same wet biscuits, the same dawn mist and the same distant thumping, sometimes closer, sometimes far off. Time here is not time at all, but simply waiting." Still, he adapts. He keeps his gear clean as best he can. He trades cigarettes for extra tea rations. He earns a quiet reputation for reliability, not for bravery or brilliance, but for steadiness. And then, in July of 1916, the Battle of the Somme begins. Harold is part of the third wave. By then, the ground has already been churned by days of artillery. The air is thick with cordite and smoke. He writes one last letter before the attack, though it never reaches his mother. "If I should not return," it says in neat, looping script, "know that I walked forward thinking of home, not of glory, not of fear, but of you and the smell of bread baking on Thursday mornings." His battalion moves forward under heavy shell fire. The mud clings like a living thing. By evening he is found, not wounded but deeply shaken, kneeling beside a shell hole, cradling the helmet of a friend who did not survive. He does not speak for 2 days. After the Somme, Harold is changed. He still writes, but less often. His words become more fragmented, his tone more distant. He stops drawing maps. He avoids the officers' eyes. In the winter of 1916, he is transferred to a quieter sector near Ypres. He spends his days repairing wire, boiling lice-ridden uniforms, and listening to the wind whistle through shattered trees. He carves a chessboard into a scrap of wood and whittles tiny pieces from shell fragments. It is perhaps his last creative act. He is wounded, not fatally by shrapnel in early 1917, and is evacuated to a hospital behind the lines. There, surrounded by antiseptic and gauze, he sleeps for almost 2 days straight. A nurse writes that he spoke in his sleep, repeating just one word: home. Harold Templeton survives the war. He returns to England thinner, quieter, and older than his years. He never marries, never speaks much of the trenches. He works again as a clerk, this time in a library. In later years, he is known as Mr. Templeton, the man who always polished his shoes and who preferred walking to the bus. He dies in 1968, alone but not forgotten. His service medals tucked in a wooden box beside old letters and a chessboard with missing pieces. His life was not marked by heroism in the way the papers would describe, but it was marked by endurance and by the quiet, constant effort of surviving the unspeakable with dignity intact. So when we speak of trench soldiers, we do not speak only of bravery under fire. We speak also of men like Harold Templeton, who simply stayed, who woke each morning in the mud, did their duty, and dreamed always of home. Now let's step back from the individual and gaze into the cultural shadows of the trenches themselves, the oddities, the mysteries, the small rituals and lost traditions that gave life its strange texture beneath the weight of war. Picture the trenches again, but this time not in motion, still, abandoned, silent. The war is over, the men are gone, the rifles lie rusted, and the rats too have found new homes. What remains, buried beneath layers of earth and time, are the fragments, the cultural remnants of a world lived intensely and briefly, just below the surface of the modern world. Archaeologists who've returned to these sites over the past century have discovered more than bullets and bones. They've found shaving kits, carefully folded letters, and even chess pieces carved from chalk and shell. They've unearthed jam tins used as makeshift stoves, trench art made from shrapnel, and harmonicas rusted solid, but still hinting at the shape of song. What's most striking is not the weaponry, but the ordinary. the deeply human traces of men trying in their own quiet ways to maintain identity, dignity, and sanity. One soldier might have carved his name into a plank of wood above his sleeping space. W. Thorpe, June 1916. Another may have painted the side of a dugout with a crude image of home, a cottage, a tree, a dog waiting on the step. One trench complex in Belgium revealed walls papered with torn pages from fashion catalogues and newspapers, giving it the eerie sense of a lived-in sitting room trapped in time. And then there were the rituals. Every battalion had its own habits, some superstitions, some just small comforts. A soldier might always carry a rabbit's foot or a photograph folded exactly in thirds. Others might insist on lighting 3 cigarettes with 3 different matches, a tradition that grew out of the belief that lighting 3 from one match would give a sniper time to aim. There were trench newspapers too, handwritten or typed on battered field machines. They bore names like the Wipers Times, filled with dry humor, bad poetry, invented advertisements, and mockery of both the enemy and their own commanding officers. Laughter, it seems, was one of the few forms of rebellion that still came easily. Songs drifted up from the dugouts at night, not just patriotic anthems, but bawdy tunes, folk melodies, and bits of music hall numbers. One common refrain, heard in many versions, went simply, "We're here because we're here because we're here," endlessly repeated, not out of meaning, but from the strange comfort of rhythm, of something predictable in an unpredictable world. And then there were the mascots. Units adopted dogs, cats, goats, even pigs. One regiment reportedly kept a bear cub, though how it was acquired remains a mystery lost to time. These animals too became part of the rhythm. Fed scraps, kept close, they were reminders of a world beyond the wire, a world with warmth and softness. Trench art, as it came to be known, was another form of expression. Shell casings were etched with floral patterns. Bullets were carved into rings. Buttons were turned into lockets. These objects weren't just decorations. They were acts of quiet defiance, of beauty, wrestled from the machinery of death. Years later, when archaeologists began retrieving these items, they often found them tucked into corners, not discarded, but placed, as if their owners meant to return, or perhaps meant to leave a piece of themselves behind. Not all mysteries were found underground, though. Letters were sometimes recovered unopened, never sent, never read. Their contents range from mundane updates on weather and rations to haunting declarations of love or fear. One, never posted, begins, "I dreamt again last night of our kitchen. You were peeling potatoes. I could smell the rain outside the window." Such moments are not dramatic. They are not big history, but they are real and they matter. In recent years, digital reconstructions of trench networks have helped historians understand how soldiers navigated their strange underworlds. Some trenches curved deliberately, designed to reduce the impact of shell blasts. Others followed no obvious pattern, rushed, improvised, muddy mazes of necessity. Even now, in quiet fields across France and Belgium, you can still see the faint depressions of trenches beneath the grass. Birds nest in the places where bayonets once gleamed. Poppies grow in soil that remembers. And sometimes when heavy rains come, old items rise again. A spoon, a comb, a dented helmet, each one a whisper. These are the quiet echoes of trench culture, not the battles, not the strategies, but the texture of life, the habits, the jokes, the griefs and amusements that gave shape to days that might otherwise blur together into the pale memory of mud. They remind us that even in a place of hardship, people still sought meaning, comfort, and the tiniest joys they could hold on to. And now, having explored those forgotten fragments, let's turn our gaze away from the trench floor and upward toward the officers, the nurses, the politicians, and the civilians. Those whose experiences of the Great War formed a striking contrast to the soldiers in the mud. While trench soldiers like Harold Templeton waded through cold sludge and rationed biscuits, a different version of the war unfolded just beyond the horizon. Not easier necessarily, but strikingly different, less soaked in mud, more veiled in distance. A war seen from above, in both the literal and social sense. Imagine for a moment an officer's quarters, perhaps a field headquarters situated in an old French farmhouse. The wooden floor creaks beneath polished boots. There's a table in the corner cluttered with maps, a decanter of brandy, a brass lamp flickering with uneven light. The room smells faintly of damp paper and tobacco. Here, decisions are made about troop movements, artillery coordinates, and strategic timing. The officers, often drawn from wealthier or educated classes, lived by a different code. Their uniforms were better tailored. Their meals, when possible, were warmer and more varied. Many had servants, batmen, assigned to maintain their gear and prepare their food. And yet even here, the war reached them. The distant roar of shells, the arrival of casualty reports, the letters from home lined with black-edged mourning paper. Some officers slept on camp beds rather than dugout floors. They might enjoy tea brewed from real leaves or a tin of preserved peaches from a care package. Yet beneath the veneer of order, many wrestled with guilt, isolation, and the impossible weight of command. They gave orders that sent others into the fog. They watched as names on their rosters slowly disappeared. In their journals, we see the tension, the effort to maintain composure, to remain gentlemanly in a world unraveling. One captain, writing after a particularly disastrous day, noted simply, "I dined at 6, roast tinned beef, the men are gone." Some tried to shield their soldiers, others to inspire them. A few distanced themselves entirely, officers in name only, adrift in their own solitude. And what of those far from the battlefield? Back in Britain, the war touched every household, but differently. In drawing rooms and schoolhouses, at factory benches and kitchen sinks, the conflict was both abstract and intimately felt. Women stepped into roles previously closed to them, working in munitions factories, driving ambulances, staffing hospitals. They wore trousers, cut their hair shorter, learned to repair engines and reload rifles. Many discovered new independence, even as they worried constantly for husbands, sons, brothers. Food grew scarcer. Sugar was rationed. Butter became a luxury, yet even as scarcity grew, so did community. Victory gardens sprang up in empty lots. Fundraisers were held in parish halls. Letters were written by candlelight and carefully folded with pressed flowers or pencil sketches tucked inside. For the upper class, life was altered, but rarely undone. Many retained their estates, their silver tea sets, their staff. But even they were not untouched. Sons were lost. Titles passed earlier than expected. A sense of invincibility, of inherited safety, was eroded. The war, after all, did not discriminate in its ultimate price. Hospitals and convalescent homes, scattered across England and France, became spaces where the different classes collided. Young nurses from working-class families tended to aristocratic officers with missing limbs or trembling hands. Language softened in those moments. Barriers, if not broken, blurred slightly. And what of the politicians? In London, the War Cabinet worked long hours beneath chandeliers and oak beams. They debated figures and maps, policies and promises. The decisions were complex: logistics, alliances, morale. They spoke of numbers, divisions, tonnage, supply lines. Far from the trenches, they crafted the machinery of war with words and paper. Some believed in the war's righteousness, others were quietly haunted. A few had sons serving at the front, and when the telegrams came, the rooms fell silent, even in Parliament. As the war dragged on, a subtle shift occurred. Public opinion, once draped in patriotic fervor, began to fray. Songs grew more mournful. Posters, once bold and heroic, became tinged with weariness. Newspapers printed casualty lists with fewer flourishes. people whispered not just of victory, but of when it would end. In contrast to the trench soldiers' grinding immediacy, the constant mud, hunger, danger, those removed from the front experienced a slower rhythm, one marked by uncertainty, by the long wait for news, by the unsettling mixture of routine and dread. This divide, the trench and the drawing room, the front line and the home front, created two parallel wars, each real, each painful, but each shaped by its own texture. And yet, when the war ended in 1918, both worlds were changed. The soldier, returning with sunken eyes and a distant gaze, stepped back into homes that no longer felt familiar. And the civilians, once protected by distance, looked at the returning men and realized they had never truly understood what the war had meant. Bridges would be built, stories would be shared, but the full weight of the trenches, the cold, the lice, the loneliness, would remain known only to those who had lived it. Now, as we begin to close our journey, let us gently reflect on the quiet bravery of those who endured it all, the rhythm of a soldier's life, the hum of history beneath our feet, and the strange comfort of remembering those forgotten days as night gently falls around us. You've journeyed far tonight, from the damp, cramped hollows of the frontline trenches, where each moment was steeped in uncertainty, to the quiet back rooms of field officers, to the makeshift rituals of bored, frightened soldiers passing time, to the homes and halls far from the front, where distant hearts beat in tandem with men they loved and missed. And now, as the hours stretch longer and your breath grows slower, we arrive at a quieter place, one not of battle or memory, but of peace. Perhaps, even in your imagination, you can still feel the faint chill of morning mist over the trench line. You can see the sun beginning to rise, slowly, over the broken ridges of no man's land. The air is still. The rifles are silent. The day is new. But nothing is hurried. There's something sacred in this stillness, not triumphant, not mournful, just quiet. The kind of quiet that wraps itself gently around you like an old wool blanket, soft from use, smelling faintly of earth and time. A silence not of absence, but of deep presence. A silence where the sounds of history no longer call for attention, but fade into soft echoes behind you. Think of the young men who once lay here, side by side in their dugouts, how they might have stared at the flickering flame of a candle or counted the wooden slats above their heads to stay grounded, how they passed tin mugs between them, folded letters into uniform pockets, watched mice scurry along sandbags like nervous little ghosts. They laughed quietly, sang softly, dreamed fiercely, and most of all they waited for the mail, for orders, for the war to end, for morning, for home. Waiting became a kind of living. And so now, perhaps you can rest in that same rhythm. You too are allowed to pause, to exhale, to drift away from urgency, because while the trenches were a place of hardship, they were also filled with endurance. Small acts of grace repeated daily, polishing boots, writing names, saving crusts of bread, protecting comrades, carrying water by hand in the dark. These were the acts that sustained a generation. Not the battles, but the quiet behind them. Not the charges, but the carrying on. And now, as your mind begins to soften around the edges, those old stories blur like fog rising off a field. You're no longer watching, you're drifting, back past the rifles and gas masks, past the rusted helmets and carved initials in wooden beams, past the letters folded in trembling hands. The war is over now. The mud is still. The lamps are out. Somewhere, far above that forgotten front, the stars are coming out. And here, now, where you are, all is quiet. There is nothing more to do, nothing more to carry. Only the soft weight of sleep settling over your limbs, only the memory of those who endured, and the rhythm of history breathing out. You are safe, you are warm, you are home. Good night.